Oh, Karen called Grandma. A leech got fined and community restrictions. The community meeting was supposed to be routine, but the air in the clubhouse crackled with something venomous. Karen Whitaker, the HOA president, stood at the podium, her manicured nails tapping impatiently, her voice sharp enough to slice through the murmurs. Some people, she sneered, think they can mooch off our community like leeches. The room fell silent. Eyes darted to Eleanor Grayson, the 78-year-old widow who'd lived on Maple Lane for 4 decades. Eleanor sat in the front row, her hands folded neatly over her knitted shawl, her face calm but her eyes burning. Karen's words weren't just a jab, they were a public execution of Eleanor's dignity. Everyone knew who the leech was. Eleanor, who'd tended the community garden for years, who'd baked cookies for every new neighbor, who'd never missed a dues payment despite her fixed pension. Karen's accusation wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Karen had been gunning for Eleanor ever since the older woman questioned her plan to replace the park's wildflower garden with a sterile modern fountain. Eleanor had rallied neighbors to save the garden, a haven for bees and kids alike, and Karen took it personally. Tonight, Karen was doubling down. Her clipboard stacked with complaints she'd fabricated. Eleanor's roses were overgrown, her porch light too dim, her very existence a blight on the HOA's vision of perfection. Across the room, I sat gripping my notebook, my pen digging into the paper. I'm Mia Torres, a single mom and freelance writer who'd moved to Willow Grove 6 months ago. I'd seen Karen's type before, power-hungry, thriving on control, but this was different. Eleanor wasn't just a neighbor, she was the heart of this place. I glanced at my son, Leo, doodling in the seat beside me. He loved Eleanor's garden, spending hours chasing butterflies there. Karen's vendetta wasn't just personal, it was tearing at the soul of our community. The tension had been building for weeks. Karen's reign as HOA president was a masterclass in pettiness. She'd slapped fines on anyone who dared to leave a bike on their lawn or plant unapproved flowers. But Eleanor was her favorite target. It started with a warning about her unkempt roses, which were actually prize-winning heirlooms. Then came the letters about her mailbox, her fence, her failure to comply. Each one was a jab, a way to wear Eleanor down. The neighborhood watched, some in silent outrage, others too afraid of Karen's wrath to speak up. Then came the petition. Karen wanted to bulldoze the community garden, Eleanor's garden, for her fountain, claiming it would elevate property values. Eleanor fought back, collecting signatures to save the garden. She stood at the park's edge every evening, her frail frame unwavering, talking to neighbors about the bees, the kids, the memories. I joined her one night, Leo tugging at my hand, and saw the fire in her eyes. This garden's not just plants, she'd said, it's love. Karen's response. A new rule banning excessive gardening, aimed squarely at Eleanor. But Karen didn't stop there. She started spreading rumors Eleanor was hoarding HOA funds, neglecting her duties, living off the community's goodwill. The Leech comment at the meeting was just the latest escalation. I watched Eleanor's hands tighten in her lap, her lips pressing into a thin line. The room was a powder keg, and Karen was striking matches. Then came the twist. A voice cut through the silence, not Eleanor's, but someone else's. That's enough. Karen. It was Tim, the quiet groundskeeper who'd worked for the HOA for years. He stood at the back, his weathered face red with anger, holding a crumpled piece of paper. Tim was a ghost in these meetings, always fixing sprinklers or trimming hedges, never speaking up. But tonight, he was done. You want to talk about leeches, he said, his voice low but steady. Let's talk about you. The crowd gasped. Karen's smirk faltered. Tim held up the paper, a receipt. He explained, for $5,000 in HOA funds Karen had spent on landscaping consultations that never happened. He'd found it in the office trash, along with emails showing Karen had pocketed the money for her own backyard remodel. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face went white, her clipboard clattering to the floor. Tim wasn't done. He revealed Karen had been sabotaging the garden herself, uprooting plants, blaming Eleanor to justify her fountain plan. He'd caught her on his phone's camera, sneaking into the garden at night with a shovel. I felt my heart race. Leo looked up, wide-eyed, sensing the shift. Eleanor stood, her voice steady but sharp. "You called me a leech. Karen, but you've been bleeding this community dry." She pulled out a folder, her own evidence, collected over months. Receipts, emails, photos of Karen's late-night garden vandalism. Eleanor hadn't just been fighting for her garden. She'd been building a case. The meeting exploded into chaos. Neighbors shouted, some demanding Karen's resignation, others defending her out of fear or loyalty. Karen tried to regain control, her voice shrill. "This is slander. You're all jealous of my vision," but the evidence was undeniable. The garden's destruction, torn up roses, crushed daisies. A splintered bench wasn't Eleanor's doing. It was Karen's. She'd trampled the very heart of Willow Grove to fuel her ego. And now the truth was out. The board called an emergency vote. Karen's presidency was stripped on the spot, her fines and rules overturned. But that wasn't enough. The crowd demanded justice. I stood up, my voice shaking but clear. Karen's actions didn't just hurt Eleanor, they hurt us all. The garden's gone. Our kids have nowhere to play. We need accountability. Leo squeezed my hand, and I felt a surge of pride. This was for him, for all of us. The board proposed a fine $10,000 to be paid to the HOA for garden restoration. Karen balked, claiming poverty, but Tim's receipts showed she'd funneled far more than that into her own pockets. The crowd wasn't having it. "Pay it back," someone yelled. Others suggested community restrictions, no more HOA rolls for Karen, no access to shared spaces until she complied. The vote was unanimous. Karen's reign was over. But the real justice came from Eleanor. She didn't gloat. Instead, she walked to the podium, her shawl slipping slightly, and spoke. "This garden wasn't mine. It was ours. Karen broke it, but we'll rebuild it, together." Her words hit like a wave, washing away the anger. Neighbors clapped, some teared up. Leo tugged my sleeve, whispering, "Can we help Grandma plant again?" I nodded, my throat tight. Karen slunk out, her head down, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. The next day, signs went up in the park, "Rebuild the garden." "Join us" volunteers poured in, bringing seeds, tools, and hope. Eleanor led the charge, her hands in the dirt. Leo at her side. The fine was just the start. Karen's real punishment was watching the community she'd tried to control come alive without her. She'd called Eleanor a leech, but Karen was the one who drained us. Now, she was ostracized, her influence shattered. As the garden bloomed again, I watched Leo run through the new flower beds, laughing. Eleanor caught my eye and smiled. Justice wasn't just the fine or the restrictions, it was this, the community, whole again. But the fight had left scars. Was Karen's punishment enough? Did we go too far? Or not far enough? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's right? What's wrong? And how we move forward.